Everybody, this is Dream, and today we have a massive 12-game slate for college basketball. We have a pretty extensive slate here. It looks like it's going to be pretty good. There's plenty of value available today with all the teams playing, and there's lots of kind of injuries on some of the teams, which definitely gives it a boost when it comes to the quality of the slate and having some value that you can mix in with expensive players. That said, I am looking at it for being a better to pay up at forward positions and then save more money in the guards, with a couple exceptions. But I think there's some viable options across the board, and so you can kind of mix and match your lineup depending on how you want to utilize it. As for the particular games themselves, there's some pretty tight games, and then there's several games that are going to be blowouts. So I do have to take that stuff into consideration as well. But overall, I've got 5 guards and 6 forwards for you throughout varying pricing. Try to get some value plays at each position. So let's go ahead and get into it here. We're going to start with the guards here and look at Marcus Noel for Kansas State. Now, obviously, he's got a tough matchup against Kansas, but he's only had a few games under 30 fantasy points all season long. He's got a really good amount of upside here. It is a tough matchup, but he should place close to 40 minutes like he did last time against Kansas. And this game, while Kansas is probably going to be favored, they do have an opportunity to play and win, as they did in the last game against Kansas, where he played 42 minutes and did pretty well. He didn't have his best game that time, but he also was a lot more expensive. So I look for him to have some nice upside in this situation. Then we'll look at Terrence Shannon Jr. for Illinois. He's had 2 bad games all season long. He last game against Nebraska, he had 55 fantasy points. I expect him to have a massive game here. He had 1 bad game last game against Wisconsin, but he should be able to bounce back in this nice plus matchup for him. I really think he's probably the top play on the slate for guards. Jordan Hawkins really looks good for Connecticut today against DePaul. He has had some nice upside this season, and he's been solid as a starter all season long. He has had two bad games all year, and other than that, he's been really good, and his price is pretty fair. A little bit safer price than Terrence Shannon, but he's around the same price point, but I think they both have good opportunity in this game, though I would say Shannon is the best of the two. Jaden Epps for Illinois is a good value play today. He has had some good upside and should be starting again. He's got a decent floor for the price, and I think he's viable on the slate. He definitely isn't a guy that's going to get you, 40 fantasy points, but at his price point, he only needs to get around 20 or so for him to really pay off a lot, but he'll probably get in the 15 to 25 range. Then we'll look at Cam Carter for Kansas State at $4,000. He has been starting and playing 30 minutes per game recently. He's only had 3 games all year under 10 fantasy points, and at $4,000, that gives us a lot of confidence for him to be a playable player on this particular slate. He's one of my favorite value plays overall. Then we're going to look at the forwards, and it's going to get a lot more dicey here. We're going to start with Jackson Davis. Now, he's $11,300, so obviously we're going to have to find ways to pay for him. But he's been on an absolute tear with 60 fantasy point games in 3 of the last 5 games, and 5 of the last 6 over 52 fantasy point games. He is just absolutely dominating everybody. He's also getting a ridiculous 1.5 fantasy points per minute. He's a great play on the slate. Then we're going to look at Oscar Tshiebwe, who is just a double-double machine. He has big-time upside in this matchup here against Mississippi, who probably don't have anybody that can really slow him down. And I expect him to play well in this one. He has a double-double mentality, and he should be able to go for a 20-20 game, which he does occasionally. This just looks like a type of game where he's going to have that upside, though it isn't the highest scoring game comparatively to other games that Kentucky plays, but I feel like he's got some really good opportunity in this one. Jalen Wilson for Kansas obviously been playing really well. He's got some pretty good upside, but not as big as Oscar or Trace Jackson Davis I already mentioned, but he's still got some good opportunity, though he just hasn't been getting the double-doubles that we would really like him to get at this price point, but he's still viable on the slate in a plus matchup. Then we'll look at Chris Murray, who I actually like a little bit better than Jalen Wilson today. He's got 50 fantasy point upside here. He's had some big games of late and only a few under 30 fantasy points all season long. Great opportunity for him against Northwestern for Iowa. also averaging 1.09 fantasy points per minute. And then Quentin Post for Boston College. He's kind of what I would guess is maybe a little bit more of a sneaky play today. He's really only been in the starting lineup for the last 5 games. And since then, though, he's been over 26 fantasy points in the last 4. And he should have some good minutes here and upside with his minutes increasing with his quality of play. Though he is a little bit more scoring dependent than some of the other guys. But he's viable on the slate. And then finally, David Nungesson. I don't know if I'm saying his name right, for Kansas State. He's a little bit streaky, but he's back in the starting lineup, and he should be playing in the mid-20s most games. And he has some nice upside with a good floor at this price point. He is a viable option on the slate. So overall, I think it's a pretty solid slate for college basketball. Some of these slates sometimes don't have much value, but there's a lot of teams that have guys out and some limited, so there's some opportunity there. I'm going to go ahead and give you another flash pick simply because I can. CJ Frederick looks a little bit too cheap for this game for Kentucky against Mississippi, so he is somebody to look at as a viable option as well. So with that said, guys, thank you for liking, commenting, subscribing. If you have any comments or questions, feel free to leave them below, and have a nice day, guys.